Hello, Magic players and collectors. Welcome to the Land Library. I'm your librarian, and in this episode of latest Loadout, I'm going over Foundations. This set released November 15th, 2024, and is a set designed to be easy and accessible to new players. It heavily features reprinting iconic cards and brings a lot of things back into standard. Also, instead of a commander set, Foundations has a jumpstart set, meaning everything is actually in packs for this one. Like always, the first thing on the list is the basics. Foundations actually has a huge amount of basics in it. The main set has 2 regular prints and 2 full art prints for each basic, and the Jumpstart also has an additional 3 regular prints for each. And I had originally assumed that all of the basics would have new art, but I noticed as I was looking at them all that the regular basics are using old art, and only the full arts are new. This probably is not something most people would notice or care about, but I did, and I do. But anyways, moving on, we've got a few groups of the 10 dual colors. Starting off with the temples. If you've watched my previous videos, you might recognize the temples from the rapid fire sections, but this time, they're actually in the main set. They're pretty simple, they all come in tapped, and they can tap for either of their colors, and they scry one when played. These include Temple of Abandon, a Temple of Deceit, Temple of Enlightenment, Temple of Epiphany, Temple of Malady, Temple of Malice, Temple of Mystery, Temple of Plenty, Temple of Silence, and Temple of Triumph. Next up are the group of life gain duels. This is another set of 10 duels, and the only difference is that these give you 1 life when played instead of scrying. These include Bloodfell Caves, Blossoming Sands, Dismal Backwater, Jungle Hollow, Rugged Highlands, Scoured Barrens, Swift Water Cliffs, Thornwood Falls, Tranquil Cove, and Windscarred Crag. And then on to the Guild Gates. This is yet another group of the 10 dual color pairs that come in tapped, and they don't do anything else. These are the Azurus, Boros, Dimmer, Golgari, Gruul, Izzet, Orzhov, Radkos, Silencia, and Simic Guild Gates. However, since they are gates, it makes them a little more interactable, especially by things like Maze's End. This is one of my all-time favorite lands, and I'm so excited to see it getting a reprint. But what it does is it comes in tapped, it can tap for a colorless, and at the cost of 3 and a tap, and it bounces back to your hand, you can search your library for a gate and put it in play tapped. After which, a check happens where if you control 10 or more differently named gates, you win. It's just an alternate win condition. Next up, over in the Jumpstart set, we're done with the 10 cards groups, and now we have a group of 5. These are the Thriving Lands. They all enter tapped, and they choose a color when they enter, and can tap for the chosen color, or for their regular printed color. These include Thriving Bluff, Thriving Grove, Thriving Moor, Thriving Isle, and Thriving Heath. There are a few more groups, but the rest are incomplete groups, such as the Artifact Lands. Seed of the Synod and Vault of Whispers are getting reprinted, but the other 3 are not. These lands are just like basics, except they're artifacts instead of basic land types, and that's kind of it. The next incomplete group is the Memorials. The Jumpstart set brings in Memorial to Folly, Genius, and Glory, but doesn't bring back Unity or War. The Memorials all come in tapped and can tap to make their respective mana colors, but each have a unique effect too. Memorial to Folly for 2 generic and a black, then tap and sack to put a creature from your graveyard to your hand. Memorial to Genius costs 4 generic and a blue, then tap and sack to draw 2 cards. And Memorial to Glory for 3 generic and a white, tap and sacks for 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. The next group is one I'm unsure of the name for, but it's the lands from Onslaught that have cycling. So these include Forgotten Cave, Lonely Sandbar, and Secluded Steppe. These all do the exact same thing, just with different colors, which is come in tapped, tap for a colored mana, or cycling 1 with the same matching color. And as far as I know, the rest are standalone lands. Starting with the ones in the main set, we've got Rogue's Passage. This land can tap for a colorless, or for 4 mana and a tap, a target creature can't block this turn. Then Secluded Courtyard. This land chooses a creature type when it enters, and it can tap for a colorless, or tap for any color, but can only be spent on the chosen creature type, either casting or activating abilities. This is a fairly recent land, first being printed in Kamigawa Neon Destiny, but has seen many reprints, especially in Commander sets. And another Kamigawa Neon Destiny land, Uncharted Haven. This is a bit of a wildcard land that when played you choose any color, then it taps for 1 mana of that color. Unlike Secluded Courtyard, this has only been printed twice before, and interestingly, this print uses the Bloomborough art, which feels a little out of place and doesn't match Secluded Courtyard. Next up, Crawling Barrens. This land can tap for a colorless, or for 4 generic, adds 2 1/1 counters to itself, and turns into a 0/0 creature until end of turn. Moving on to Cryptic Caves, this land taps for a colorless, or for the cost of a generic, it taps and sacks to draw a card, but with the added condition that you can only do this while you control 5 or more lands. And the penultimate land of the main set, Demolition Field. This is another tap for a colorless land, but also for 2 generic, then tap and sack. It destroys a non-basic land an opponent controls, and then they get to search their library for a basic land to replace it with, and then you also search your library to put a basic land into play as well. And the last one I saved for last because it's actually in both the main set and the Jumpstart set. It's Evolving Wilds, with different art in each and even a new art in the main set. This classic land can, of course, tap and sack for any basic and put it in play. And Evolving Wilds' twin, Terramorphic Expanse, is also getting a reprint in Jumpstart. This has the exact same effect as Evolving Wilds, just, a different name and different art. Similarly in Jumpstart is Ash Barrens, but this is more of like a cousin than a sibling, because it can tap for a colorless and has basic land cycling 1, which is almost the same effect, but at the cost of a generic and the land goes into your hand instead of onto the field. Stepping away from the searching effects, but staying with the tap and sack, we've got Cave of Temptation. This land can tap for a colorless, pay 1 and tap for any color, or pay 4 to tap and sack to add 2 1/1s to a creature. But this ability is stuck at sorcery speed. Next up, Gitu Encampment. This land enters tapped, can tap for a red, or for a generic, and a red, it becomes a 2/1 red warrior creature with first strike until end of turn. And finally, there's 2 deserts. Both of these were first printed in Hour of Devastation, but don't really have related effects. Desert of the Fervent enters tapped and can tap for a red, and has cycling for a generic and a red. And Inpu Rivulet comes in untapped, taps for a colorless, tap and pay a life for a blue, or pay a generic and a blue, tap and sack a desert to make a target player mill 4. Oh boy, I hope you're ready for this huge list of new lands. Starting off, we have Soulstone Sanctuary. This land can tap for a colorless, and for the cost of 4 generic, it becomes a 3/3 creature with vigilance and all creature types. This is a bit of a steep cost, but unlike most lands that can turn into creatures, this one stays a creature. It's not just a one-turn transformation. This is also the only land in the set with multiple prints, unless you count Evolving Wilds being in both the main and Jumpstart, and it has its regular print, extended art, borderless, and a mana foil borderless. And that's it. Whew, what a slog to get through that crazy long list. Jokes aside though, there's really only one new land in this set. Starting off with Soulstone Sanctuary, the only new land in the set, it's kinda good, but it's still only like mid-level. Its cost to transform into a creature is kinda steep, but it's only a one-time cost, and being all creature types is great tribal. It pairs really well with like Three Tree City, but land creatures just aren't a thing most people bother playing, so it's filling a niche that, like, isn't very popular. And due to the severe lack of new lands, the impact of this set relies much more on bringing older lands back into standard, but it really doesn't bring back any heavy hitters. All of the dual colors are like pretty mid. Life Gain was already standard legal. Guild Gates aren't really getting much support reprinted, and the temples are definitely not bad, but they're not good enough to compete with the likes of like the Verges, the Fastlands, or the Painlands. They're trying to fill in that dual color spot, but it's already got really good stuff filling it. All of the single lands aren't really doing anything either. Evolving Wilds, Uncharted Haven, and Demolition Field were already standard legal. Rogue's Passage is okay, but the cost of its effect is just too much for most decks to want to run it. Secluded Courtyard is decent tribal, but there's just better tribal available, like Cavern of Souls, which does the same thing but makes it uncounterable, or Three Tree City, which can just make way more mana. Crawling Barrens is a land that can become a creature, but it's just bad at it. It's trying to fill the same niche as the one new land in this set, but Crawling Barrens costs the same as Soulstone Sanctuary and is a 0/0 instead of a 3/3, untransforms at the end of turn, and only has the one creature type. The only real benefit it has over Soulstone Sanctuary is its 1/1 counter generating. But even though they can stack, 4 mana per activation for 2/1/1s on a temporary creature, it's just so slow and costly. Cryptic Caves is just cycling 1, but with the added condition that you have to control at least 5 lands, which is not great. Like, unless you land ramp like crazy, this isn't available until at least turn 6, and even then is still just cycling 1. And Maze's End, one of my favorite lands, just can't really do anything in the current standard format. It has no support other than the guild gates right now, and without key cards like Guild Summit or Gone Gate, Maze's End just isn't very viable. It's a shadow of what it could be in Modern or Commander, but, I mean, if you don't already have one, this is a good opportunity to pull one for your Modern or Commander. And I'm not including any of the Jumpstart cards because the Jumpstart set doesn't change the format legality of any of the cards. Whatever they were already legal in, they're still legal in, and whatever they weren't legal in, they still aren't. Alright, for these scores, Standard is getting 1 out of 5. There's not really any high level, like, meta lands. There's just a lot of reprints, and the strongest land, arguably, Maze's End, isn't even that strong because none of its support came with it. But it does have decent, like, kind of low to mid level lands for less competitive standard and, like, newer players, which is kind of what it's for. So it still gets a point. For Commander, 0 out of 5. Having almost exclusively reprinted land that are all already Commander legal, there's no change. They didn't do anything. For theme, 2 out of 5. The theme of this set is basically just simple, easy cards for beginners, and the lands kind of reflect that, but there's nothing else really bringing things together, so it's kind of not that strong of a theme. The art is 1 out of 10. Reprints sometimes get new arts, but not this time. There's only one new art on an old card, and the one new land does have a few versions, and the full art basics do go kind of hard, but that's it. The basics having 2 full arts and, like, Soulstone Sanctuary borderless are the only thing holding this back from a 0. It's pretty disappointing because the set has some really awesome art and special prints, just not in the lands. Overall, this is a 4 out of 25. I didn't think a set could even score this low, but here we are. I get that this is a set made for beginners, but they could have at least still made it interesting. The rest of the set has such cool stuff in it, like the Fracture Foil cards, the Showcase cards, the special guests, but there's just nothing in the lands. One new land, one new art, even the basics don't have new art. The disparity between the other cards and the lands just makes it feel like the lands in the set were nothing more than an afterthought. I was almost finished with this video, and then I found out that there actually is a quote-unquote commander set. There only seems to be 3 cards in it, but Command Tower is in it, which is a land, so I felt the need to put this in while I was, like, editing. I actually don't know how you're supposed to get these commander cards, especially since there's only 3. I don't think that's like a deck you can get or something. So I don't know how to get this command tower other than, I guess, buying singles from someone. But it is technically part of this set. It has the set symbol, so I threw it in here at the end. If you've made it this far in the video, please drop a like for turn and subscribe for more Landfield content. If I missed anything, got anything wrong, or you just have questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next latest loadout when Innistrad Remastered comes out.